Hi, I'm Colin Caton, and today we're here with wetland scientist Mike Ball to talk about the importance of biodiversity in our wetlands. But first, what does biodiversity mean? Biodiversity means diverse life in a certain area or region, and that can be plants, animals, insects, or fish. Like we're here, and we are today at the Herring River Restoration Project in Wellfleet, Massachusetts. And so we're going to start asking some questions about wetlands. So, first, what is a wetland?
Well, a wetland in the background here is one type of wetland. Typically a wetland is an area where the water is either just below or at or on the ground surface. And sometimes that water fluctuates. And what that water does is that it creates conditions, maybe a drop in the amount of oxygen that's available to plants. And this change in conditions makes it possible for only a certain set of plants to grow in these areas. So as you can see, we've got a lot of marsh grass back there. It really outcompetes any other grass because it can survive in an area where water on a daily basis comes up and down in the soil. So wetlands provide a lot of functions for wildlife, a lot of value to people, protects our lands from storm damage and flooding, cleans our water by trapping sediments and pollutants, and I think most importantly provides a lot of habitat for wildlife.
Thank you. And what is a wetland scientist like yourself?
I'm a wetland scientist. I have a background in plant biology, but a wetland scientist can be a chemist, a soil scientist, an ecologist, a geologist, and basically a wetland scientist is someone who uses their knowledge of either plants or soils and animals to answer questions about wetland function. We like to solve problems regarding wetland restoration. We like to answer questions regarding how best to restore wetlands that have been injured by human activities and other activities. We do a lot of different things.
Okay, and are there different types of wetlands?
There are. We're looking at a coastal wetland, and wetlands can be either primarily freshwater or saltwater.
Isn't there a kind of wetland that's kind of a mix of saltwater and freshwater?
That's right, and we're looking at one right now. If you look here, this is an area where we've got salt water coming in from Cape Cod Bay, but we have fresh water coming in from all of these lands, some of which are wetlands in this area over here, and so you get this mix of salt water and fresh water that almost like they fight against each other. One flows into the other and it creates an estuary. And so in this particular case, you've got salt, you've got seagrasses, salt marsh plants that do really well in these what you can call brackish waters. That's kind of a mix of salt and fresh. Wetlands can be dominated by trees. They can be forests. They can be shrub dominated. They can be herbaceous, where there are no shrubs at all, and it's almost like a meadow. And then you can have wetlands where plants are rooted on the bottom of a water body or a river, and their leaves and their flowers can be just below the surface or at the surface. So there's all different types of wetlands, and they all provide slightly different functions for different animals and plants.
What lives in coastal wetlands?
Tons of things. Anything from species of fish and birds and mollusks and crustaceans. Here a good example would be the type of fish you mentioned earlier, herring. Herring use these wetlands to spawn and to live. You have mammals that use wetlands. Raccoons, for instance, come down into salt marshes to feed on mollusks and small fish. But so many different species, and we can't forget about the insects and the worms and a lot of the species that provide food for the larger animals.
Explain the importance of biodiversity in coastal wetlands.
All right. Well, it's commonly known that biodiversity is really what sustains a healthy coastal marsh. When you think of all the different animals and plants that comprise a habitat. The more diverse a wetland is, the more healthy it is. In other words, the less diverse a wetland is, the more susceptible a habitat like this is. More susceptible a habitat like this is more susceptible to, say, damage. Like if pollutants come into an area, if a wetland is less diverse with plants and animals, it might be a lot easier for that wetland to get damaged. So diversity is widely recognized as something that really maintains and sustains a habitat.
What is affecting our coastal wetlands?
A lot of different things. It's a really good question. When you think about all the people that live here on Cape Cod, there are a lot of people that have houses right by the water, and you can almost consider so much of the damage has been done in the past. That's really important to understand, that people have been living here on the Cape for decades and decades, and over time, as more people have moved here and built their roads and built their houses, wetland areas like this have been fragmented, they've been altered, and now that we live here, and we live here in great density, a lot of our waste from septic systems, from road runoff, from fertilizers on our lawns, all of these chemicals can work their way into these wetland systems and have some dramatic effects, dramatic impacts on these coastal marshes. That's just one example. I mean, invasive species that you know something about, exotic invasives like Phragmites, certain types of animals come in and they can really reduce the diversity of a wetland, and that will make the wetland more susceptible to permanent damage. So we talked about development, we talked about pollution, talked about invasive species, and you know, man-made oil spills, as we've seen in the news recently, can really impact the wetland in a very adverse manner. So a lot of things we have to watch out for, and we have to realize that we're responsible for keeping these wetlands healthy, because they provide us a lot of function and value.
And last question, how can we help protect our coastal wetlands?
Well, doing things like this is making people more aware of the functions that wetlands provide, the valuable functions that wetlands provide. You know, there's just so much to learn about these areas, and the more that people understand about wetland habitats, particularly coastal wetland habitats, I think the more they'll appreciate them and have a better understanding of how to protect them. I think something we need to do is put more focus on restoring some of our more degraded wetland habitats. Herring River is an example. This is a location where they built a road years and years and years ago, back in the early 1900s. And they were trying to drain some of these areas that are upstream from this bridge. And what they did is they basically shut off the natural flow of not only salt water coming into the system, but fresh water leaving the system. So one thing that we're planning to do is to remove that obstruction, that bridge, and put in a system that will allow traffic and people to cross over the Herring River, but it will also allow more flow to come up and down this river system, and that'll improve the ecology of the area. So making sure that we undertake these projects and do them successfully is really important. And the last thing I'll mention is making sure that we maintain and obey the laws that protect wetlands in our towns and in our states, because without these laws, too much can occur to adversely impact these wetlands, and therefore, you know, making sure that these laws remain in place for years and years, and well, the future wetlands will be good.
Thank you. Thank you so much for letting us interview you today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mike.